They called them the perfect couple, a love story that melted hearts across continents. David Thompson, the wealthy Canadian tech mogul haunted by divorce, and the beautiful young Indian student Priya Sharma, two people from different worlds who found each other in a sea of loneliness. Their wedding became the stuff of legend, a moment that made skeptics believe in love again. They called them the perfect couple, a real-life fairy tale. David Thompson was 50, tall, gray-haired, successful in every way, a man who had conquered his professional world but was struggling to conquer his loneliness. Priya Sharma was 20, beautiful, elegant, and seemingly full of admiration for the man twice her age. She wasn't just his bride. She was his second chance, his hope reborn. Their lavish wedding, held at an exclusive venue overlooking the Toronto harbor, was straight out of a romance film. Gold and crimson silk draped against the city skyline. A custom fusion band played both Western love ballads and Indian classics. Guests included CEOs, investors, and high-profile media personalities, each of them captivated by the stunning cross-cultural celebration of love. Their wedding video garnered over 5 million views in just 72 hours. Hashtags like Love Beyond Borders and David Priya Fairytale began trending across platforms. Photographs showed Priya gazing up at David with apparent adoration. David smiling, tears in his eyes as she placed a garland around his neck. The age gap, most called it inspiring, a symbol that love had no boundaries, only belief. For a while, people genuinely believed that their story was proof that soulmates could come from opposite ends of the world, and 30 years apart in age. Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable video, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon. That way, you'll never miss any new coming videos like this. Now, let's get back to it. What the world didn't know, what nobody knew, was that behind those smiles, rehearsed vows, and dreamy captions lay a sinister equation, meticulously calculated by a desperate young student who saw marriage not as a commitment of love, but as an opportunity for survival. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. To understand how this story ended in murder, we must first understand how it began in longing. David Thompson wasn't your average middle-aged man. He was the senior vice president of a tech unicorn based in Toronto. For over 25 years, he had led digital revolutions, turned failing startups into billion-dollar giants, and mentored a generation of young tech leaders. His salary was $350,000 per year, not including the stock options that had made him a multimillionaire. He lived in a luxurious $2.3 million penthouse with skyline views of Lake Ontario. His life, from the outside, looked perfect. But on the inside, he was falling apart. 18 months before he met Priya, David had gone through one of the most painful events of his life. His wife, Patricia, had left him after 20 years of marriage for a younger man, a colleague, someone closer in age to their college-aged kids. The divorce crushed him. His children, Marcus and Sophie, took their mother's side. They barely visited. He became a ghost in his own home, surrounded not by family laughter and warmth, but endless silence. That silence echoed, each day louder than the last. Late at night, David would sit in his office with journal entries titled, "What Went Wrong?" and "Am I Lovable Anymore?" That was the question that haunted him. So at 50 years old, faced with aging, failure in personal life, and isolation, he did what many in his shoes do. He tried to start over. A cherry red Porsche soon appeared in his reserved parking space. His wardrobe changed. Tailored Armani replaced his corporate monochrome suits. He began hosting dinners with 20-somethings from networking events, young professionals who saw him as a mentor, maybe even a little more. Friends whispered that he was going through a midlife crisis. Maybe he was, but all David wanted was to feel seen again. And that's when she appeared. Priya Sharma. Elegant, smart, gentle in speech, with those wide eyes that made him feel, for the first time in years, like a man who might still be worth loving. Or, at the very least, useful. But David didn't know then that he was no longer leading a business. He was walking straight into a master plan. She lived just 3.2 kilometers from David's penthouse, but her world couldn't have been more different. Priya Sharma was a 20-year-old international student from Mumbai, living in a cramped, shared apartment near the University of Toronto campus. Her room was barely big enough to fit a bed, a desk, and dreams that were growing harder to hold onto. From the outside, she appeared full of promise, brilliant, confident, and charming. But behind her careful smile was a young woman drowning in debt, desperation, and pressure that most people couldn't even imagine. Her parents had risked everything to send her to Canada. Back in Mumbai, Meera and Raj Sharma had mortgaged their modest family home to cover tuition and living costs. Every conversation with them felt like a performance. "Beta," her mother would say on shaky video calls. "We believe in you. You'll save us, won't you?" Priya would nod silently, offering a smile as tears welled up just outside the frame. She had just 14 months left on her student visa, and with it, a ticking clock on her future. She worked weekends at a luxury boutique in Yorkville, folding handbags she couldn't afford and watching wealthy women buy clothes worth more than her month's rent. She'd started her higher studies at IIT Delhi, one of India's most prestigious institutions, before transferring to the University of Toronto. Chemistry was her initial passion, but she quickly pivoted to computer engineering. Not out of love, but strategy. Software jobs were in demand, and demand meant pathways to permanent residency. Priya had always been sharp, not just in academics, but emotionally. She knew how to read people. She could sense opportunity the way a hunter senses movement in the grass. But university brilliance didn't translate into guarantee, not in a city like Toronto, and certainly not with a visa clock running out. When a Canadian boy she'd dated ghosted her the moment her future got complicated, Priya learned her first painful lesson. Love means nothing when survival is on the line. And that's when the whispers began. In quiet corners of coffee shops late at night after study groups, she started hearing stories, other international students sharing secrets, shared threads of strategies, stories of girls who had found solutions through marriage, specifically marriage to older Canadian men. The rules were simple. Older men were easier. They were lonely, often divorced, willing to believe in second chances, and more importantly, they had the power to sponsor permanent residency. All it took was 24 months of cohabitation, 2 years of romance followed by a quiet divorce. By then, the legal status would be locked in. It wasn't love, it was logistics. So Priya got to work. She immersed herself in the psychology of older men, watching TED Talks, reading forums, even downloading books about male vulnerability after divorce. She practiced her Canadian accent every day in front of a mirror. She listened to piano instrumentals to soften her tone. She crafted the perfect persona, a soft-spoken, gentle girl who was wide-eyed about life in Canada, but full of love for her culture. She spent weeks at luxury networking events around the city. Her criteria were clear: older, successful, recently divorced, emotionally vulnerable. And then she met him. David Thompson, high-ranking tech executive, conservative, polished, lonely, and exactly what she'd been searching for. He was charming, overly generous, and visibly longing for connection. Just days after they met, he messaged her almost every night. He sent Uber rides so she could visit him. He bought her winter boots for the snowfall. She cried softly, thanking him in front of the fireplace, told him no one had ever taken care of her like that. That night, David journaled that he hadn't felt this alive in years, that he finally felt needed. And Priya, she simply smiled, because the game had begun. The wedding was nothing short of spectacular. It looked like something out of Vogue or a Netflix drama, a flawless blend of East and West, modern and traditional, love and legacy. Held at a luxury Toronto venue overlooking the harbor, the guest list included CEOs, influencers, journalists, and executives from Canada's biggest tech firms. It was the kind of event that turned ordinary people into internet royalty. Priya wore a stunning $25,000 lehenga that blended Indian embroidery with Western silhouettes. The photos of her twirling under the chandelier went viral within hours. David wore a perfectly tailored designer tuxedo, beaming as he slipped the ring on her finger. Behind them, floral arrangements worth tens of thousands framed the moment. It was choreographed brilliance. But what nobody knew was that some of those family members crying tears of joy weren't family at all. They were actors, hired, paid, coached. Priya had spent weeks working with a local Indian theater group, carefully selecting performers to play her relatives. Each of them given backstories, accents, emotional cues. They entered the venue as her loving family from Mumbai. No background checks, no questions, just smiles, blessings, and perfectly timed sobs during the ceremony. The officiant read their vows, and Priya, holding David's hands, spoke the words flawlessly. "You are my light, my protector, the one I waited my whole life for." Guests were moved to tears. David couldn't stop smiling. In that moment, he believed in the deepest corners of his heart that he had won. That after losing his first marriage, his children's trust, and his self-worth, he had finally found someone who truly loved him, who made him feel safe again, seen again. He had no idea what he'd really bought himself that day. The morning after their wedding, immigration paperwork was already being prepared. Priya's application for permanent residency was filed within 48 hours. As the new spouse of a Canadian citizen, her case was fast-tracked. She quit her boutique job the same week and moved fully into David's penthouse. From the outside, their world looked magical. Instagram was flooded with couples, photos, shopping trips in Yorkville, romantic dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, weekends in Niagara-on-the-Lake. Every photo carefully curated, every caption a strategic blend of devotion and public perfection. "Forever grateful to build this life with you, my love," one post read, shot in a luxury convertible, Priya leaning into David. "Living the dream, blessed beyond words," said another, this one at a champagne brunch where she tagged 3 upscale brands and gained 10,000 new followers overnight. Their relationship wasn't just a romance, it was a product, a brand, a story people wanted to believe in. Toronto's elite invited her to diversity panels and women's tech events. Priya spoke passionately about love without boundaries, blending cultures with dignity, and her gratitude to the Canadian system. Behind closed doors, she was redecorating David's world with his money, with European furniture and fine Indian silk. She filled the penthouse with flavors from both her heritage and his tastes. She made chai in the mornings. She sipped French rosé in the evenings. David's children visited a few times. Priya baked for them, smiled shyly, called them by name. Marcus even told David later, "She's not so bad, Dad, you seem really happy." And David was. His journal entries from that period read like poetry. "She makes me feel like a man again. For the first time in years, I look forward to coming home." But what David saw as healing, Priya saw as progress. Each smile, each dinner, each compliment was a step closer to her goal. And in her mind, she wasn't pretending. She was surviving. The countdown to permanent residency had already begun. And all she had to do now was stay married for 2 more years. Fairy tales rarely show you what happens after the wedding. 6 months after David and Priya's headline-making ceremony, the glow began to fade. Tiny details, small disconnections, quiet absences, almost invisible, unless you knew what to look for. David noticed them first, then second-guessed himself every time. Priya's kisses, once spontaneous and sweet, now felt like scheduled lines in a well-rehearsed play. A kiss goodbye in the morning, a kiss hello at night, always timed, always polite, but never warm. Her phone, once casually left charging in full view, was now always locked, clutched tightly even in the bathroom. She stopped asking David about his tech projects, about board meetings or startup deals, unless they involved her legal paperwork. Every conversation circled back to immigration. When will the residency finalize? Should I apply for my next document now or wait? Will they interview me alone? Her calendar filled up, networking events with other Indian students, language volunteering with newcomer centers, lunches with old friends no one had heard of before. She's social, David told himself. She's building her life. But he couldn't ignore the bills. Designer outfits, handbags, skincare subscriptions, over $15,000 in monthly expenses, all justified under style investments for her public platform. Priya's Instagram had surged past 100K followers by now. Brands were offering her partnerships. They expect me to look the part, David, she explained softly. I represent women like me who find freedom through marriage. David wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. But reality didn't stop whispering. Phone calls to her mother in Mumbai became daily and secretive, conducted behind closed doors in flawless, rapid Hindi with a tone that never matched the soft girl she showed David. He once knocked gently during a call. She flinched, turned quickly, and snapped, "Private talk, David, please." Her eyes didn't hold apology, they held warning. Then came the friends. Young Indian men and women, mostly students, who started visiting the penthouse like it was a clubhouse. They laughed at inside jokes in Hindi, whispered in corners, gave David looks, a mix of sympathy and amusement. Once he walked in to hear one of them sarcastically say, "How do you say sugar daddy in Punjabi?" When David asked Priya what they were laughing about, she smiled and said, "Nothing important, just cultural stuff." Something was changing. She moved into the guest room, citing his old man habits, his early bedtime, the morning news playing too loud. He didn't argue. He just stood outside the door that used to be theirs and felt like a stranger in his own home. One afternoon, David tried to surprise her. Dee told him she'd be studying at the library all day. So he brought her favorite coffee and waited patiently by the third-floor reading desk for over an hour. She never showed up. When he asked the staff later if they'd seen a girl matching her description, they shook their heads. "She doesn't study here," one librarian said gently. "At least not regularly." That night, David asked about her day. She smiled and said quietly, "Long, really long, too much Java code." And that was when he felt it fully. He was being played. But he still wanted to be wrong. He checked the home network logs the following week, just a habit from his years in tech. What he found wasn't just suspicious. It was a portal into hell. Hidden layered folders, encrypted chats, login activity coming from a location he didn't recognize. There was a separate apartment. Another address. There was nothing random here, only patterns. Patterns that didn't point to a marriage. They pointed to a mission. And the man who had built billion-dollar algorithms was finally starting to see the one that had been built around him. David Thompson wasn't a man who ignored patterns. For most of his career, he had spotted weaknesses in code that no one else could see. He could trace a single digital anomaly back to its source with forensic clarity. Now that same instinct was screaming at him. For weeks he had tried to ignore the signs, the rehearsed affection, the disappearing days, the fortress-like privacy around her phone and laptop, and now a second apartment, an entirely different address she'd never mentioned once. He had stumbled on it while checking their shared home network. A device logged in from an IP address miles away, synced with Priya's cloud backups. When he followed the breadcrumb trail, it led to a downtown condo leased under a shell name, a name he later matched to a burner email address Priya had used during her university enrollment. Curiosity turned to dread as he dug deeper. The coffee she never drank, the volunteer work that had no paper trail, The library study sessions that led nowhere. It was all smoke. Lies layered with just enough detail to buy time and keep him numb. But what truly shattered him was the folder she never meant for him to see. It was encrypted, buried deep behind decoy files labeled as coursework. When David cracked it using recovery tools built for recovering deleted code, he found something that made his chest hollow. A digital roadmap of their entire timeline, starting the week they met. Every message, every move, every milestone, tracked and analyzed like a tactical operation. There were saved articles about spousal sponsorship requirements, immigration loopholes, and legal minimums for permanent residency. There were screenshots from Reddit threads titled, "How to Keep a Husband Just Long Enough," and PR Timeline, "When to Divorce Without Losing Status." And then drafts of divorce papers, dated exactly 2 years and 2 weeks after their wedding. The minimum legal period required to secure her immigration status through marriage before separation wouldn't affect it. David's hands trembled as he read the name of the divorce lawyer he didn't even know existed in their lives. He felt the walls of the penthouse close in, the laughter, the wedding pictures, the late-night confessions. They weren't memories. They were moments in a con. But the worst discovery wasn't legal, it was emotional. A WhatsApp group chat titled Canadian Wives Club. He opened it breathlessly. What he saw turned his stomach. It was Priya, laughing, joking, trading tips with other Indian women who had pulled off similar scams, discussing strategy, emotionally dissecting their older husbands, debating timelines, loopholes, even how to fake bruises in case of allegations. The girl he thought needed saving. She was the predator. David sat in silence for hours, surrounded by evidence he couldn't believe was his life. A man known for precision and power in the tech world had become a puppet in someone else's game. His fairy tale bride hadn't just lied to him. She had studied him, like she was prepping for an exam. For a few days, he didn't confront her. He didn't say a word. Instead, he did what he knew best. Blueprints, organization, data. He reached out to a top immigration fraud attorney, Catherine Rodriguez. "I don't need to ruin her," he said, voice shaking. "I just want the truth documented." Over the next 3 weeks, David compiled 200 pages of evidence, bank transfers to India, proof of the second apartment, phone records, social media backups, screenshots of manipulated conversations, witnesses who had seen her at parties where she claimed to be in class. A wall of truth was forming, and behind it, the person he thought had saved him from heartbreak was about to face everything she thought she'd escaped. For David, this wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. He had lost his marriage, his children, and his self-worth once. He wasn't going to lose himself again. Not this time. It happened on a quiet Saturday morning. The kind of morning that once would have meant coffee for two, a sunrise over the city skyline, and maybe a drive up to Muskoka. But now, the penthouse was colder, not because of the weather, but because David had made a decision. He wasn't going to stay silent anymore. He had spent weeks gathering everything: surveillance footage, chat logs, financial records, Priya's secret lease, her burner accounts, group messages, academic absences, even witness statements. His 200-page case file was airtight. His immigration fraud attorney, Catherine Rodriguez, had told him, if half of this is true, she's going away for years. David wasn't the man she married anymore. He was the man waking up from the illusion. Now he was standing across from her, in their shared kitchen, with a folder in his hand that would shatter everything. "We need to talk," he said. Priya looked up from her phone, her tone sweet but distant. "Sure, what's up?" He walked over slowly, placing the folder down on the granite island between them like it was evidence in a courtroom. "I know everything." She didn't react for a moment. Then she laughed, a casual laugh, like she was playing it off. "Everything is a bit vague, don't you think?" David said nothing. He simply opened the folder. Inside, printed photographs, timelines, WhatsApp transcripts, screenshots from the Canadian Wives Club bank transaction records, and a copy of her secret apartment lease. And right there in bold text, a cover letter addressed to Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada. Notice of fraud allegation, marriage sponsorship. The smile fell from her face like a mask ripped in half. In an instant, the soft, sweet girl vanished. What stood in front of David now wasn't his wife. It was the real Priya. Her eyes narrowed, cold, strategic, measuring. "You think you've figured it all out," she said. Her voice was flatter now. The accent less polished, the tone more raw, less Canadian, more calculating. David nodded slowly. "You used me. You used my heart, my money, my name, all to get what you needed." "I did what I had to do," she snapped, suddenly spitting the words like venom. "Do you think your country makes it easy for people like me?" David stood silent, watching the unraveling. Then her voice dropped. "Dark, dangerous. You want to destroy me?" she said, stepping closer. "I'll destroy you first." She pulled out a tablet from her purse. A collection of evidence opened instantly. Audio recordings, photos of bruises, carefully edited clips of arguments. One showed David angry and pacing, stripped of context. Another recorded him muttering under his breath during a heated moment. And one of the two of them in bed. His voice recorded, whispering something vulnerable. "I own you. I paid for your love." A phrase spoken in passion, now twisted into a predator's confession. "I've been documenting everything," Priya growled, eyes fixed on him. "You think the world will see a victim? You're a 50-year-old white man who paraded around a 20-year-old immigrant like a trophy." David said nothing. "I scream abuse, and your career is over. I show Marcus and Sophie the videos, and they'll never speak to you again. I go viral again, just not the way you planned." This wasn't blackmail. It was war. But David didn't flinch. "I've already submitted everything," he said calmly. "To immigration, to my lawyer, to my security firm. You're too late." Priya stared at him, her expression now unreadable. Behind her eyes, wheels were turning, strategizing. She wasn't going to cry. She wasn't going to apologize. She was going to plan. And that plan no longer involved running. It involved something far more final. Because in her mind, there was still one way to win, one last card to play. If David exposed her, he had to disappear. Disappearing was no longer an option. For most people, this would have been the end. A ruined scam, a deportation flight, a scandal too big to recover from. But Priya Sharma was not most people. She had spent years preparing each step of her immigration plan. But now, with everything unraveling, David's complaint, the legal evidence, and the looming threat of a trial, she had to choose between humiliation and elimination. And so she chose murder. For 48 hours after their confrontation, Priya vanished. David assumed she'd gone to her secret apartment or skipped town to avoid arrest. He changed all the locks, alerted security, told his assistant not to accept any unknown calls or packages. He moved into his friend Michael's guest house temporarily, planning to return after the fraud investigation meeting that week. But Priya wasn't planning an escape. She was planning a funeral. Back in her hidden apartment, she turned to her forgotten passion, chemistry, the same subject she once studied at IIT Delhi, the subject she had strategically dropped in favor of a tech career for immigration purposes, but never truly left behind. Using her leftover lab access, fake credentials, and academic contacts, she began sourcing small amounts of a compound powerful enough to kill, but subtle enough to mimic natural death. A colorless, tasteless, slow-acting toxin that could trigger cardiac arrest without leaving an obvious trace. One that would vanish by the time toxicology tests caught up. She'd spent nights studying autopsy reports online, searching how older men under stress from immigration cases, divorce, and litigation had died of sudden heart attacks. "Stress-induced myocardial infarction," she whispered. "It'll look perfect." And it almost did. 2 days later, Priya returned to the penthouse. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red with tears, her clothes wrinkled like she hadn't slept. She rang the doorbell instead of using her key, a small detail that made her seem less threatening. Broken, defeated. David let her in. "I came to say goodbye," she whispered. "Before immigration takes me, before all this becomes more shameful than it already is." He didn't trust her, but he pitied her. "In our culture," she said softly, "we always end things with a final meal, closure, not for manipulation, just peace." David hesitated, then nodded. "One dinner," he said, "then it's over." She cooked for hours, an elaborate Indian feast that mirrored their very first dinner together in this same kitchen. Butter chicken, garlic naan, spiced lentils, saffron rice. Even a glass of red wine. And for David, a special glass of Dom Perignon, the same champagne from their wedding. "This is how we started," she said, cheeks wet with apparent tears. "Let's end it with dignity." David relaxed. For the first time in weeks, he let himself miss her just a little, the woman she pretended to be. They talked about the wedding, about the months they traveled, the breakfast smiles, the little rituals couples collect without knowing. And then he began to feel it. A tightness in his chest. Slight at first, but spreading. "Something's wrong," he whispered, his hand clutching his shirt. "I can't breathe." Priya shot up from the table, fear on her face, eyes wide. "David, oh my God, are you okay? Do you want me to call someone?" She picked up her phone, a perfect blend of panic and poise. "My husband," she screamed into the receiver. "He's having a heart attack. He's been so stressed lately, please hurry." Operator instructions, chest compressions, trauma responses. All rehearsed. Weeks later, security footage recovered from the penthouse would show her practicing the entire 911 call the night before, down to her trembling voice, and timing her gasps between words. David died within 15 minutes. Collapsed on the floor of the home he bought for his second chance. Believing till his final breath that she was trying to save him. While in truth, she had killed him. David Thompson died in his penthouse with a broken heart and a poisoned bloodstream. To the world, it appeared to be a tragedy of stress. A 50-year-old man collapsing after months of emotional strain, legal battles, and heartbreak. To the paramedics, he was just another high-profile case of a man who couldn't handle the pressure. His young widow sobbed at the scene, refusing to let go of his lifeless hand. The media ran with the story instantly. A love that ended in pain. Photos of their wedding resurfaced, painting Priya as a heartbroken immigrant wife who had loved her husband despite a 30-year age gap. She gave tearful interviews to local news reporters. "He was my everything," she said between sobs. "He tried to destroy my life, but I never stopped loving him." The GoFundMe reached 6 figures within days. People all over Canada and even in India sent condolences. Her Instagram boomed again, candids from their wedding, texts from David where he called her his angel, stories about how much stress he was under, how his own allegations against her had probably pushed him over the edge. The public mourned, and Priya smiled in private, because she thought she'd gotten away with it. But David had left behind more than wealth. He had left a trail. 2 days after his death, immigration attorney Catherine Rodriguez contacted police. She told them about David's 200-page fraud report, about the scheduled meeting with Immigration Canada, about the private security firm that had been hired to monitor Priya's activities, right up to the day before David died. Autopsy results came back 2 weeks later. The official cause, acute cardiac arrest. But unusual chemical compounds were found, traces not matching any prescribed medication. Subtle, but strange. Toxicologists flagged it for further analysis. And then came the breakthrough. David's digital files, which Priya thought she had deleted, were recovered by cyberforensics. Backup logs, surveillance footage, email drafts, one hard drive held rehearsals, video recordings of Priya in the kitchen the night before David's death, practicing tears, hand gestures, her 911 call, standing in the exact spots where she would later act it out for real. The university chemistry lab where she had once studied was also flagged. Dr. Owen Martin, her former professor, confirmed that the chemical she'd used could easily be synthesized with access to advanced lab equipment and certain unmonitored substrates. The final nail. A voicemail Priya had accidentally left, recorded when she failed to hang up a call properly. "I can't go back to India. I can't lose everything," he had to go. Investigators moved quickly. And in a cruel twist of poetic justice, Priya Sharma was arrested during David's public memorial service, wearing the same white sari she had once worn during their wedding ceremony. Footage of her being handcuffed in front of Toronto's tech elite spread across news networks within minutes. The trial was a global event, covered by media outlets from Canada, India, the US, and beyond. Jurors heard about the fraudulent marriage, the fake family, the burner phones, the secret apartment, the staged social media posts. They saw everything. Screenshots, recordings, security footage, the financial records, the flirtation with internet fame, the planning, the performance, the poison. It took the jury only 45 minutes to reach a verdict. Guilty. First-degree murder. It didn't end there. A multinational investigation revealed that Priya was involved in an international marriage fraud ring that targeted wealthy, older men in exchange for money or status. At least 12 similar victims were identified across North America. David Thompson wasn't the only one, just the one who fought back and paid the price. His story changed Canadian immigration policy. It raised alarms on unchecked sponsorships and inspired reforms that now require more thorough spousal background screening. The video of their wedding now has over 50 million views. But not as a fairy tale, as a cautionary tale. Because in the age of viral perfection, even the most beautiful bride can be a killer, and even the sweetest love story can end in murder. Thank you for watching this chilling true story of love, lies, and lethal betrayal. What seemed like a fairy tale romance turned out to be a calculated scam with deadly consequences. David Thompson's tragic end reminds us that not everything we see on social media is real, and that even love can be weaponized. If this story shocked you, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss our next jaw-dropping true crime case. Stay alert, stay curious, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous people wear the most innocent smiles.